Okay, welcome back. Today we're going through May-June 2024 question paper 13. Okay, so we start from the bottom. Diagram shows China's trade with Brazil for 2 years. The key is the light grey is year 1 and the dark grey is year 2. What happened to China's trade balance with Brazil in year 1 and 2? Okay, so just remember, trade surplus equals more exports than imports, and a trade deficit equals more imports than exports. Okay, so if you know that information, it should be fairly easy for us to determine which one is the correct answer. If we start at A, it experienced a falling surplus. So we can see in year 1 they have a surplus because their exports are bigger than their imports, but in year 2 their exports are smaller than imports. So their surplus hasn't fallen. They had a surplus in year 1 but a deficit in year 2. They experienced a rising deficit, therefore is also incorrect, because they had a surplus in year 1. So the deficit hasn't fallen, they've gone from a surplus to a deficit. So the correct answer here is D. They haven't moved from deficit to surplus, they have moved from surplus to deficit. Surplus in year 1 and a deficit in year 2. Okay, diagram shows the market for Indian rupee in US dollars. Now if you've watched question paper 12 and 11, should be fairly easy to identify this. So in this case the demand for Indian rupees has gone up in the foreign exchange market. Demand has shifted to the right. Why does that happen? That happens due to a rise in foreign direct investment into India. So more companies are moving into India, hence the reason why there is a need to trade Indian rupees into US dollars. So the other reasons here are incorrect in this case. They will all result in either supply shifting or they will result in demand shifting to the left. Like I previously showed you in question paper 12 and 11, showed you exactly where you can access the very good synopsis of these reasons, the Save My Exam notes on foreign exchange rates, as well as the slides that I've prepared for you from Unit 6. So please go take a look at the start of those videos so you can see and access those notes on the OneDrive. They're very good, you just have to learn them for the reasons why demand will shift either right or left and why supply will shift either right or left. The notes give you a very detailed breakdown. Okay, question 28. What are the effects on price and equilibrium quantity of the imposition of an import tariff? So remember, what's an import tariff? It is essentially the same thing as an indirect tax. So what does it do? It increases the price of a product. Well, first of all, supply will shift to the left. And when supply shifts to the left, price of the product goes up and the quantity that is traded of the product goes down. So how do we show that? If you draw a very simple demand and supply diagram, put in our initial price and our initial quantity, and if supply shifts to the left, we can see what happens here. So we can see that the price of the product will increase and the quantity that is being traded of the product will go down. So therefore we can see that the correct answer here will be C. For the others, price goes down, equilibrium quantity decreases. That's not the case if there's an imposition. That the price will decrease and equilibrium quantity will increase if they remove the imposition, because in that case supply will shift back to the right. Okay, what is most likely to promote international specialization? So again, if you watch question paper 12 and 11, you'll see that we said international specialization is focusing on making the products or the services that you are best at making. Is due to the fact that conditions of climate, etc., are different in other countries, and international specialization allows for free trade to happen. So that would be no protectionism measures. Exports and imports can freely flow from countries, from country to country. So similarities of climate in different countries, that's not going to promote international specialization. That's going to decrease the ability for international specialization. We need different climates so that we can make different types of goods, or we can have an advantage in making different types of goods. So that's why in some countries, due to their climate, some countries can produce rice better than other countries can produce potatoes, for example. Again, if the climate and the resources are similar, that does not promote international specialization. We need the resources and the climate to be different, and we need stability in foreign exchange rates also, because otherwise the instability in foreign exchange rates, if we depreciate, that makes exports more popular. If we appreciate, that makes imports more popular. So if that's very unstable, even if we specialize, our revenue is constantly going to be changing depending on whether we're importing more or exporting more. So we want stability for those as well, so that we can make estimates in the future about revenue. So like I said, it's the free movement, or it leads into free trade, which is the free movement of exports and imports. Therefore, if we get rid of tariffs and we get rid of custom duties, that is going to allow imports to come into the country freely, and it will allow us to export our products as well. So we also need freedom of movement for imports for free trade to happen, and it will encourage specialization. Okay, now this question, I don't have the calculations offhand, but we'll just go through it by process of elimination. So we can see the birth rate per thousand of population per year, population size in millions, the death rate, and the net migration rate. So remember, the net migration is the number of people coming in or out. So we can see here, for example, that in country X and country Y, we have more people coming in rather than going out. And the other way we calculate the change in population is by multiplying the birth rate by the population size. The only thing is we have to be aware of is the birth rate and the death rate are given per thousand, not per million. Okay, and then in this case, what can be concluded? Country X has fewer females. We cannot conclude that. We have not got information on how many males or females is made up from the population size. Country Y had the smallest population increase. So how we calculate the population increase? We know that the birth rate per thousand is 20. So what we need to figure out is we need to figure out the birth rate per million. So if we divide 1,000,000 by 1,000, we're going to get 1,000, right? And then if we multiply 20 by 1,000, we'll find out that that means we've got 20,000 people being born in this country for the size of the population, right? So we can do a quick calculation. If you multiply those, what you'll see is we've got 20,000 being born per million, 18,000 dying per million. So that's a difference of 2,000. And if we multiply 2 by 30, because it's in millions, we're going to get a net increase of 60,000. So we've got 60,000 more in the country plus the 50. That's going to give us 110k of a population increase in country Y. Now, without even calculating it, we can see that the population increase in country X is going to be less. So it's going to be 40,000 increase in the country itself, and then it's going to be plus 20, which is going to give us a 60k population increase. So we can already figure out that the population increase of country Y is not the smallest, it's in this case probably the largest. Country Y has the highest living standards. Again, we've got no information on the living standards here, so we can't conclude that from the table. So the correct answer here will be country Z had a decreasing population. And now let's work it out to figure it out. So we've got between the birth rate and the death rate, we've got a net increase of 5, right? And again, we need to change that 5 into not per, that's 5 per 1,000 people. So if we have 5,000 multiplied by 40, okay, now it would be 5,000 because we change it from thousands into millions. 5,000 multiplied by 40 is going to give us an increase of 200,000 people, but we have had net migration of 1 million, so the population has actually decreased by 800,000 in this country. Hence why it's correct. That statement can be concluded from the table. Okay, what best describes relative poverty? So remember that relative poverty is not the amount of $2 that's defined by the World Bank as the income level. That would be absolute poverty. Relative poverty is where we feel like we're poor in comparison to other people in the country. So if a person earns less than the minimum defined level of income, that's not relative poverty, that's absolute poverty. If a person is unable to afford the basic necessities of life, that is also absolute poverty, not relative poverty. The correct answer is C. A person has a lower living standard than the minimum level acceptable in a society. So that person is going to feel like they don't have as much money or they're poor in comparison to other people within the country. And a 12-year-old boy has never been able to access a doctor or school. They are the basic necessities of life that we need, which are given in D. So that would be absolute poverty, not relative poverty. So the other three are absolute. C is relative. We're feeling poor in comparison to other people, but we may have enough money to meet our basic necessities. Okay, what does the HDI indicate? So for you guys that are not aware, Unit 5, there's a chapter on HDI, etc., in comparison to GDP. It indicates living standards, and there's a number of different indicators included in there. So things like the years of schooling, etc., are included in HDI. It does not measure economic development, it does not measure the level of unemployment, and it does not measure the rate of inflation. So the rate of inflation is measured by CPI, the level of unemployment is measured by the unemployment rate, and economic development or economic growth is measured through real GDP. HDI, and you can check out those living standards in the Unit 5 slides for that chapter, measures through a number of different indicators what the living standards are of different countries. So not necessarily how much money they have, but what the standard of life is like. Okay, the consumer price index for a country rose during year 1 from 125 to 150. What was the country's rate of inflation? So what we need to do for CPI is we need to take the difference between the two. So 150 minus 125 gives us 25, and 25 divided by 125 is going to equal a 20% rate of inflation. So we're not going to divide it over 100, which is a common mistake that students will make, or just taking it away. We've got to divide it by the price index in the previous year. That's going to give us the inflation against our base year, which is always the first year they provide you, and in this case is 125. Okay, question 22. Which type of unemployment is generally regarded by economists as the least serious? Okay, so if we remember from our 3 types of unemployment. There's a chapter on this with slides, etc. as well, and very, very good notes. We have 3 types. We have frictional, structural, and cyclical unemployment. Cyclical is the most serious, so it's the hardest one to fix, shall we say. Structural is very serious, and frictional is not as serious. Okay, this is the way we put it in the slides and on the Microsoft whiteboard for the students that are in my class. You try and condense them very simply. So once we know this, we rank them in order. Frictional is 1, structural is 2, cyclical is 3. Therefore, the correct answer is B. Cyclical needs to be fixed. It arises from a lack of AD, and we need to use expansionary fiscal or expansionary monetary policy to fix it. Regional unemployment is a type of structural unemployment. So structural unemployment is made up of 2 different subcategories: regional unemployment and technological unemployment. And that is where industries will decline due to, for example, a change in demand. So the coal mining industry might no longer be available in certain parts of Australia, so whole regions would lose their jobs and they would need to be retrained in order to get jobs in different industries. So when we have structural, we will fix it by using supply side policies, and we'll fix cyclical by influencing or moving AD to the right. So as regional is a subcategory of structural, frictional is our least serious type of unemployment, and we fix that by increasing the mobility of labour. Okay, question 21. The table shows the annual change in GDP before adjustments for inflation have been made, and the annual rate of inflation in 4 countries. What country has the highest rate of growth in real GDP? So this should be fairly easy. How do we find this out? We just take away our GDP from the inflation rate. So in this case, in A, the country will actually have negative real GDP of -1. B will be positive of 3. C will be 15 minus 14 plus 1. And D will be -20. So even though their GDP has grown by 20%, their inflation is 40, so the real value of their growth is actually -20. So because B is the highest, it has the highest rate of growth for real GDP. Okay, what is the most likely effect of lower direct taxes on demand and supply? So remember that direct taxes are made up of 2 things that you'll be asked about in IG economics. That's income tax and corporation tax. Okay? And we're saying that we're lowering them, right? So what does that mean? If we're lowering the direct taxes that are put in an economy, both direct and income tax, that means that people and firms are going to have more disposable income, right? So they're going to have more money in their pockets left at the end of the month. And what does that equal? That means that spending is going to increase. So if we know anything about demand and supply, we know that if spending is going to increase, then that means that demand will move to the right. Yeah, so demand is going to increase, and if demand increases for the products, that means that supply is going to increase also, because the chance to make more profit will also increase as we get more products or more goods and services demanded. So indirect tax will result in an increase in demand and supply. Okay, question 19. What correctly explains the effect of monetary policy measures on macroeconomic aims? So what we should know by now is that monetary policy measures are interest rates, credit regulations, So that's how easy or how hard we make it for people to borrow money, the money supply, and the exchange rate. Okay, and depending on what we're trying to do, if we're using expansionary or contractionary, these will all change in terms of either increasing them or decreasing them. So a higher exchange rate will make imports more expensive and improve the balance of payments. That's incorrect. If we have an appreciation of the exchange rate, that will make imports cheaper and that will decrease the balance of payments. The balance of payments will be improved if our exports are cheaper and we increase our level of exports. But for higher exchange rate, imports will actually become cheaper and the amount of imports coming into the country will increase, so our balance of payments will go down. An increase in interest rates will encourage investment and lead to higher economic growth. That's also not true. When we use expansionary monetary policy, we decrease the interest rates. So the interest rates go down, and what that does is that disincentivizes people to save their money, and it encourages them to borrow money, which means that they can spend more in the economy, they can move AD to the right, and economic growth can happen. Higher interest rates will result in less income from savings and therefore higher unemployment. Well, we've just talked about that right there. We said that's wrong. Higher interest rates will result in more people saving money, and it will result in this case, it's contractionary policy. So it may result in higher unemployment, that part is true, but it will result in more income from savings. So the correct answer is C. An increase in the money supply in an economy without spare capacity will result in demand pull inflation. And I'll show you a diagram to explain that. First thing is, an increase in the money supply is an expansionary monetary policy. If you're still confused on these, please look at the condensed notes that I've provided for monetary policy. I've given you a very simple breakdown like this with the different type of policies about whether they go up or whether they go down, for whether they're expansionary or contractionary. This is expansionary, so AD will go to the right. Now if I can just move this down slightly and I'll show you what the graph will look like. So remember that this is going to be our AS. Okay, we're drawing the Keynesian AS curve. And when we're saying that we've no spare capacity, that means that we're somewhere here at the relatively inelastic point. So what we can see is that if we increase AD when we've got very little spare capacity, that's going to result in a significant increase in the price level, and a significant increase in the price level, that is the cause of demand pull inflation. So if we bring this across here, we can see the price level will have increased dramatically, and we may have only increased our output by a very small amount, if even anything. Okay, question 18. The diagram shows selected areas of government spending for a country. What was the total government spending on merit goods? So the first thing we need to identify, what are merit goods? Merit goods that are given in IG Econ. Healthcare and education, they're two merit goods, because merit goods are goods that are good for us. They generate external benefits, they're positive for society. So all we have to do to get the answer here is we have to add up education and healthcare. So if we add up 36.4 and 81.8, we should get 118. Oh, sorry, my pen has fallen. We should get 118.2 billion. Unemployment benefits are transfer payments, and national defence are not merit goods. Normally we use the national defence budget to generate our public goods. That was another, just quickly on this, the national defence question was another one that came up in 2023. What area of spending do we use to generate public goods? That's national defence. Okay, Why might measures to reduce unemployment also make inflation rise? So, they encourage cheap imports. That's incorrect. If we have a higher level of imports, that will make AD go to the left. So that will actually reduce the price level and reduce inflation, not make it rise. They require wages to fall, or they reduce firms' costs. They're not going to be true, right? We don't have any information on those. We don't know if a measure to reduce unemployment, like let's say education and training, etc., will reduce firms' costs or make the wages fall. But what we do know, especially because they're not going to influence aggregate demand, right? They're going to influence aggregate supply. We know that inflation will rise if AD goes to the right, or there's a good chance that it will, and if demand is increased, then that's exactly what will happen. AD will shift to the right, price level will increase, and it may be possible that we will have inflation due to the measures we use to reduce unemployment. Okay, how is the average cost of a product calculated? I won't spend too long on this. It's pretty simple. It's the total cost divided by the output. So if we divide our total cost by the output, we're going to get our average cost. If we want to find our average variable cost, it's our total variable cost divided by output. If we want to find our average fixed cost, it's our total fixed cost divided by output. Okay, question 15. A busy restaurant employs a large number of highly skilled chefs to individually prepare high quality meals. What is an advantage to the restaurant of this type of production? So, quality of the meals varies according to which the chef prepares it. Now that may be true, but that is not an advantage to a restaurant. So that's what we're looking out for here. Which one would be advantageous to the restaurant? It takes time to train a highly skilled chef. That would be a disadvantage for the restaurant, not an advantage. A highly skilled chef is paid more than an unskilled cook. Again, that is true, but it is not an advantage to the restaurant. It's a disadvantage. So the only one that would be an advantage to the restaurant is that it now becomes easier for them to expand their menu or to offer a wide variety of meals. Okay, for 14, a firm increased output from Q1 to Q2 and they achieved economies of scale. How is this shown on a firm's average total cost curve? So just remember that when they achieve economies of scale, what does that mean? That means that their average cost of production goes down, or their average costs go down, right? So very simply, we can just have a look at this from Q1 to Q2. So if we start at the bottom here, we can see our average costs are here, but our average costs move up to here, so our average costs are increasing. So this would be an example in D of diseconomies of scale. And it is the exact same for C. The point at which we start to the point at which we finish is a higher average total cost. So that would also be diseconomies of scale, and it's the same with B. So the only one that would show us economies of scale where the average cost from where we start to where we finish comes down would be in A. Okay, now even if you don't know that, if you just know your definition and you're not familiar with these curves, the information is laid out in front of you. Once you know what economies of scale does, and we should all know that by now, then it's very easy for us to see what happens. Okay, 13. What is most likely to be a disadvantage when operating a small firm? Okay, so from the previous questions we know that a small firm, I think this was question paper either 12 or 11 from May or June 2024. Also, there was a question relating to this. We said a small firm has better communication and they've got more freedom in operation than a large firm. But what we also said was that they were less likely to have economies of scale. And what type of economies of scale would they be? They would be internal economies of scale as a disadvantage. Diseconomies of scale here, or a lack of external economies of scale. If we have a lack of diseconomies of scale, that's actually an advantage, because that's a lack of our average costs going up. Internal economies of scale is concerned with how the business can control or how they can benefit from their average costs going down. And economies of scale only happens when a business can expand or get big, so by definition a small firm is unlikely to have them. Okay, question 12. What is the best definition of a trade union? Best definition of a trade union here is a group of workers that negotiate collectively on pay. A group of workers that negotiates fixing prices, that's not a trade union, that's a form of price gouging. That would be something suppliers may possibly get together to do, but we know a trade union is a collective group of workers who negotiate on pay. They also try and get better conditions for their workers, like better health and safety standards, and like negotiating holidays, etc., maternity leave agreements, things like that. Okay, they're not a group of countries, and they are not a group of firms also. They're a group of workers. Okay, question 11. A firm changes from producing individual pieces of wooden furniture by hand to a mechanized production process using the division of labor. What is the most likely set of outcomes? So basically what they're doing here is they're moving from producing labor intensively to capital intensively. Now what happens when we move from labor intensive to capital intensive? The workers that were previously making this wooden furniture by hand are now operating machines, if they still have their jobs, in order to make the furniture. Therefore their motivation will decrease, right? So we can get rid of A. The average cost will come down, so we can get rid of B. Why will the average cost come down? As we use machines, because it's less labor intensive, we don't have to pay the machines a salary, thankfully. We don't have to pay them wages. We only have to take on the initial cost of buying them, but because of that, our average costs can be reduced because we don't have to pay salary or wages to people, especially if they're highly skilled to make this wooden furniture every month. So even though average cost comes down, the total costs will actually increase. And why is that? When we move from labor intensive to capital intensive methods of production tend to be more productive, right? And if we become more productive, that means that we're making more output. But as we're making more output, our total costs will rise. Why? Because we're going to need to buy more raw materials, we're going to need to have maintenance of the machines, etc. So even though we're making more, and on average we're making more profit, our total costs will increase as we continue to buy more materials due to the fact that we're making more wooden furniture. Okay, question 10. What function does a central bank provide for an economy? So a central bank will issue banknotes. And how do we know that? What does a central bank do? A central bank controls, or it operates, monetary policy. And what is a tool of monetary policy? Money supply is one of those tools, and also interest rates are one of those tools. When it comes to interest rates, however, even though it's an option for C here, provides high interest rate accounts to encourage savings, they will control the interest rate, but it is the commercial banks who will actually offer it to consumers. With the money supply, they actually do the printing of the money in the central bank, so they are the ones who control the money supply. They don't manage the debt of private sector firms, and they don't provide mortgages. Again, providing mortgages is something that a commercial bank will do. They will just dictate or provide guidance on what the interest rate for the commercial banks should be. Okay, question 9. The government wishes to reduce the harmful emissions from road transport. What measures would be effective in helping to achieve this aim? So if they increase expenditure on oil exploration, that's not going to affect road transport at all, is it? Definitely not. If they reduce the tax on the production of private vehicles, okay, what's that going to do? That's going to make more people drive. And if we have more people driving private cars, our harmful emissions are actually going to increase, not decrease. Similarly, if we reduce incentive to purchase electric vehicles, we know that electric vehicles are better for the environment. So if we reduce subsidies, for example, for people to buy them, less people are going to buy electric vehicles, which means that more people will switch to buying vehicles that are harmful for the environment, so that will actually increase the emissions, not reduce them. So our correct option is introducing a subsidy on public transport. If we have a subsidy on public transport, that is going to increase the supply of public transport. It's going to reduce the price of public transport and make people switch from driving their own private vehicles to using public transport instead, which is going to reduce the harmful emissions from road transport. Okay, the price elasticity of supply of a product is 1.0. The price of the product is $10 and the quantity supplied is 200 units. If the product increases in price to $11, how many units will the quantity supplied increase by? So we just input this into our formula. We have X, which is our quantity supplied that we don't know, over 10%, because 10% is the increase in price, equals 1.0. So once we do this, again, we bring across the 10, we multiply it, and what are we going to get? We're going to get a 10% increase in quantity supplied. And a 10% increase on 200 units is going to be 20 units. Okay, question 7. What is included in the study of microeconomics? So remember, microeconomics is the study of the behavior of firms, individuals, and individual markets. So demand pull inflation, that is a macroeconomics topic. Increasing unemployment is a macroeconomic topic because they affect the whole economy. And the size of the budget deficit is another macroeconomic topic. Again, they affect the whole economy. Diseconomies of scale, however, they are a microeconomic topic because they are relating to an individual firm or an individual industry having their average costs of production increase. Okay, question 6. An explosion in an important oil pipeline causes the world price of a barrel of oil to increase from $50 to $100. Before the explosion, the world demand for oil was 100 million barrels per day. The world PEG for oil is minus 0.2. So, what is the new global demand for oil? So very similar to question 8. Again, we just input our information into the formula and then we can figure it out. Okay? So, we're told the price increase here 100 to 50, from 50 to 100. That's a 100% increase. So on the bottom of our formula, we're going to have 100%. That's going to be a positive figure, right? On top, we're going to have the demand, which we don't know, and we're given the PED value. So the PED value is minus 0.2. So again, what divided by 100 is going to give us minus 0.2? That has to be, or it will be, a reduction of 20%. okay, minus 20%. We know that our world demand for oil was 100 million barrels a day. So what's 20% less of 100 million? That's going to be 80 million. So the new global demand for oil would be 80 million and the new price will be $100. Okay, question 5. In the diagram, X represents the original equilibrium point in the labour market for engineers. So remember, we're looking at the labour market, and I discussed in previous videos about how productivity will affect that. So an increase in the skills of engineers results in an increase in productivity. This is where we're starting, and remember I told you previously, I said when we're looking at the labour market, okay, then if productivity, so I'll just say productivity goes up, then the demand for the labour goes up. And if productivity goes down, then the demand for the labour, for the workers, goes down. So in this case, because of that, from what we know, the correct answer will be B, which is where demand will shift here from D1 into D3. We'll go directly across, demand shifts to the right because of the increase in productivity. Remember that when we're talking about this, we're talking about the demand of the owners. The owners are going to demand more workers because they are now more productive, which is the reason why it's a demand shift. Okay, what are the 3 questions that determine resource allocation? That's what to make, how to make, and for whom to make it for. Okay, if you need to recap on them, I don't need to go through the other questions, they're very specific. They're all included in the Unit 1 Basic Economic Problem slides. Okay, a deposit of shale oil is discovered in an area of farming, and we're given the following estimates. So we're asked, what is the opportunity cost of using the land only for farming? So what we need to do is we need to add up the cost of using it for farming and take away it from the cost of using it for shale oil extraction. So in this case here, we've got income after tax of 10 billion for farming and income after tax of 40 billion for oil. So what we'll do is we'll just put the two of them here. I'll say F for farming, and we've got 10 billion. And over here for oil, we've currently got 40 billion. Okay, we're going to receive 5 billion in taxes from farming and 10 billion in taxes from extraction of shale oil. So that means that our total for the shale oil here is going to be 50 billion. That's how much we would earn from doing that. And our total for the farm, or for using the farming, is going to be 15 billion. Okay, now remember that opportunity cost is talking about what we've given up. So in this case, we've given up the oil extraction, but we've generated 15 from making that choice, but we've lost out on 50. So what we've actually lost out on is 35 billion, which is the 50 billion we generate from the oil extraction minus the 15 billion that we would generate from the farming. Okay, what would be included in the factor of production? Land. So just remember or look over your factors of production slides and notes available in the OneDrive. Again, this is just a simple definition, there's no calculations involved. Land is concerned with natural resources. The only one here which would be absolutely natural is wheat. We would need other factors of production to make bread. The factory building would be capital, and a sports arena would also be capital, the investment that goes into making them. The ocean, for example, is a factor of production. Land, wheat would be as well. We haven't used any other factors of production to make a final product. And finally, how can the economic problem be described? Again, I've gone through this, just look through your previous videos. I've given you 5 different things that I said will help us answer any question on this. That's limited resources, unlimited wants, choice, scarcity, opportunity cost. So therefore, as insufficient resources, limited resources, don't satisfy our unlimited wants. Okay, thank you for listening.